Publications. That's how we published our book, Song of Songs for Singles. When I started trying to get our book published, what I learned is it's really hard to get a book published unless you are somebody. And by somebody, I mean you have about 25,000 social media followers, so a pretty big somebody. So without any of that, it's kind of like you have self-publishing options, but we have a school right there, so we were like, we need to encourage our faculty to write, so that's what we're doing. We created Faith Publications. Dean Taylor's written a little book, Pathway to Pastoral Ministry. As even Jake was talking about yesterday, we need more young men that are interested in the ministry. And furthermore, we need more, middle-aged men that are interested in the ministry. Some people think it has to just be a young man. Well, God's actually calling plumbers and just foremen and successful businessmen and engineers out of a ministry or a life of financial gain into His harvest field. And so we pray regularly, Lord, that the Lord of the harvest would send forth laborers into His harvest field. So Dean has written Pathway to Pastoral Ministry. This is designed for young men, though, not really for older men. Bobby Jameson has a book called The Path to Being a Pastor. That one's more for like older men and younger men, but this one's more designed for younger men. And then Charlie Carter, Mapping Discipleship, is another book that we've published. This is like my go-to discipleship book. I do talk about more than just the Song of Songs. And when I'm meeting with people, the principles in mapping discipleship are basically just being employed in the intimate relationship between husband and wife, or when young people are unmarried, in areas of purity and pursuing purity. So those are some books that are back there. As far as the prices, I need to write the prices on the other ones, but they're 25% off. So $15 for my book and Pathway to Pastoral Ministry. And then Mapping Discipleship is, I don't remember. It's 16 minus whatever 25% off is. Okay, so back to the Song of Songs. We are going to fly. So this is going to be a session that none of you have heard before. It's actually a session that I hesitate to even work through, because when you're thinking through the Song of Songs and you're working through sexuality, you could almost kind of picture it as higher education. The material we went through in the first session yesterday, that's kind of like your 100 levels class. All right, and then the material that we went through in the second session, that was a little bit deeper, right? And that was probably more along the lines of a master's degree type of a class. And the material we're going through this time is kind of more of like that PhD type of level class, all right? And we're going to be dealing with some of the more difficult sides of marriage, and that's what we're going to do. The section that we're going to look at is not just Song 5.2-6.3. You can see that text on there on the screen. That's where we're going to start, but I'm going to go through this rather quickly because this section doesn't really end until Song 8.4. This was the section of the Song of Songs that I struggled with for the longest time. I didn't understand it. I did a lot of teaching even on the Song of Songs, and I had some of the ideas that were correct, but it was actually a long time before I figured this part out. And you might be like, well, who else agrees with you, right? Not many. All right, I will tell you, but I'm not by myself. In fact, there was recently a book that was written on this idea of love and war by Danilo Verde. I forget the title of the book now. It came out just in 2020, and I have other ancient sources that actually agree with me. It's funny how my interpretation, that I'm not borrowing from people and just studying the text and trying to figure it out. It's actually very consistent with the rabbis. I was talking to our brother about St. Jerome. St. Jerome studied under the rabbis. And so he actually agrees with some of my interpretations here. St. Jerome does. Not necessarily on the Song of Songs, but we're going to be in Genesis a little bit. So this is kind of the more difficult stuff. And because it's more difficult, and it's more of like that PhD level, it's not material that I generally go through with people. But because this is a pastor's conference, and because I have a few people here that have heard me speak on the song, they haven't heard this part. None of you have heard this part. I thought that this would be appropriate and beneficial. And furthermore, the timing to teach this information is not necessarily when somebody's been married for 5 or 10 years. Though that's appropriate, but it's really even more appropriate before they're even married. That they would understand what are some of these principles that God teaches, because the primary audience is the young ladies. What does God's Word teach our daughters about love, marriage, and intimacy so that they may love their husbands as Christian women? Okay, that would be a key phrase. And we're going to talk about the idea of how she's got to believe She will have to believe. And furthermore, another reason why I often don't go through this material is because who is the primary audience of the material? Ladies. Okay, and I've already established that yesterday. I know we have a few new people here, but I talked about how the book of Proverbs is written to a son. There's the father that's teaching the son. In the Song of Songs, it's the mother teaching the daughter. The mother occurs 7 times, the daughters of Jerusalem occur 7 times, and the daughters of Jerusalem are the primary audience. So single unmarried girls are the primary audience of the Song of Songs. We can all still learn from the principles that are here, but that is the primary audience. Okay, so with that massive introduction, we're going to jump into Song 5:2. You can go ahead and open your Bibles to Song 5:2. Song of Songs, chapter 5 and verse 2. And we're going to work through chapter 5:2 through 6:3. We are definitely not going to uncover every little detail, but we are going to kind of go through the overview of the main message of this entire section. Am I supposed to be done at 10 o'clock?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Verse 2, I slept, but my heart was awake. A sound, my beloved is knocking. Open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one, for my head is wet with dew, my locks with the drops of the night. I had put off my garment, how could I put it on? I had bathed my feet, how could I soil them? My beloved put his hand to the latch, and my heart was thrilled within me. I arose to open to my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh on the handles of the bolt. I opened to my beloved, but my beloved had turned and gone. My soul failed me when he spoke. I sought him, but found him not. I called him, but he gave no answer. The watchmen found me as they went about in the city. They beat me. They bruised me. They took my veil, those watchmen of the walls. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him, I am sick with love. What is your beloved more than another beloved, O most beautiful among women? What is your beloved more than another beloved, that you thus adjure us? My beloved is radiant and ruddy, distinguished among 10,000. His head is the finest gold. His locks are wavy, black as a raven. His eyes are like doves beside streams of water, bathed in milk, sitting beside a full pool. His cheeks are like beds of spices, mounds of sweet-smelling herbs. His lips are lilies dripping liquid myrrh. His arms are rods of gold set with jewels. His body is polished ivory, bedecked with sapphires. His legs are alabaster columns set on bases of gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet, and he is altogether desirable. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. Where has your beloved gone, O most beautiful among women? Where has your beloved turned, that we may seek him with you? My beloved has gone down to his garden, to the beds of spices, to graze in the gardens and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He grazes among the lilies. Okay, what do we have going on in this text? Well, it states in verse 2, I slept, but my heart was awake. A sound, my beloved is knocking. Does this sound familiar? If you remember our text from yesterday, that second section, okay, we talked about a woman who was at night and she's sleeping. And she wakes up, her husband's not there. So then what does she do? Okay, she gets up and she goes after him. Well, this is a little different. Similar, but different. Here, she's sleeping and then he's knocking. And what is he wanting? He's wanting to come in. The reason, he names her 4 names. Those are going to be important in a little bit, but we'll skip it for now. My head is wet with dew, my locks with the drops of the night. Okay, so he's been outside for a while because guess what? The dew has been condensating upon his head. This is a metaphor. What is the metaphor? I'm just going to be explaining things. If I'm teaching through this, I can often go through it in more like, what do you think it is? And we can meditate upon it for a minute or two. Sorry, you're not going to get that. Okay, they haven't had an intimate encounter in quite a while, which is why he's been outside of the house. The house is metaphorically her body. He's wanting to have an intimate encounter, and that hasn't transpired in quite a while. And he's saying, can I come in? How does she then respond in verse 3? I had put off my garment. How could I put it on? I have bathed my feet. How could I soil them? What do you think she's saying? Not now. I'm not interested. Okay, well, they haven't had an intimate encounter in a while, and now what is she saying? I don't want one now either. And furthermore, she's using these rhetorical questions like he's, well, back off, buddy. type of an idea. What's going on here? Well, let's be honest. The relationship that the Song of Songs teaches and develops, there's the Garden of Eden, and this is the way that we want it to be, and this is the way that God designed it. But guess what? We don't live in the Garden of Eden, friends, and this is where most of our people are at. So should we be surprised that the song is going to talk about these types of issues? We shouldn't be. In fact, we can learn what the Bible teaches concerning this incompatibility, quote unquote. Nobody's compatible. All right? Incompatibility in marriage. When somebody wants intimacy and the other person doesn't, what do we do? And furthermore, we're going to develop this in light of Genesis 3:16, because there is an intertextual, that means the Bible is like interpreting the Bible, connection between Genesis 3:16 and Song of Songs chapter 7 and verse 10. So as I begin this, I want to just talk through, my thing's not working here. Just a minute. It was off, now it is on. It's probably going to work now. There we go. A quid pro quo. Most people aren't familiar with that kind of terminology, but basically it's a favor expected in return for something else. In fact, this is a way a lot of even Christian marriage books operate. And they say, hey, you know what, if you do this for your husband, then guess what? He's probably going to do this for you. Well, that's actually often the case, but is that the gospel? Did God love you because you loved him? Wrong answer, friend. So the marriage relationship is not supposed to be a quid pro quo. The gospel is the gospel, and it permeates all aspects of life, including the marriage and the intimate aspect of life. I'll love him, or I'll respect him if he will love me. Sound a little familiar? Okay, there was a book that was popularized a while ago, Love and Respect. It had a lot of good advice in it, but its overall foundation is not a gospel principle. What is the gospel principle? I'll love him regardless of how he treats me, because Christ loved me. That's the gospel. Similarly, a man is like, well, I'll love her if she'll respect me. And we get this whole little deal that the couple is working through, and it's a favor expected in return for something else. Then we have the other, we're getting heightened here, the Talionic principle. That's the eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth. You hurt me, I'll hurt you. Okay, so now we're all sinners, and we sin against one another. Well, how do you respond when somebody sins against you? Well, you poke me, I'll poke you. Well, that's not the gospel either, is it? Okay, well, you poke me, well, I'm going to love you in return. Guess what that is? That's the gospel. Okay, so as we think through the relationship, the battle of the sexes, okay, we see the foundation for the battle of the sexes, okay, in Genesis 3:16. It states, your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. There's a lot of literature that's been written on this verse. I contributed to that. I wrote an article on the meaning of the word desire in this verse. That word desire occurs 3 times. It occurs here in Genesis 3:16, Genesis 4:7, and Song of Songs, chapter 7, verse 10. And the big mystery is, why in the world does this word occur in Song of Songs, chapter 7, verse 10? It's very clearly referring back to Genesis 3:16. I'm so glad you asked. It begins right here in chapter 5. The answer comes in chapter 7. So buckle up, because we got a long ways to go. Genesis 3:16 is like the beginning of how the friction between husband and wife begin. Your desire, your inclination to lead will be for your husband, but he will rule over you. He's saying, hey, this is the plan. And she's like, yeah, well, how can I get him to do what I want him to do? And as you think through the arsenal in a wife's tool belt, what is the most powerful weapon that she has in the marriage relationship? It's intimacy. She has something that he wants. So that's why we connect Genesis 3:16 to Song 7:10, which is what Solomon intended us to understand. And it begins right here in Song 5:2 and 3. He wants intimacy. It has been a long time. And she's like, no, I'm not interested. Okay, so I just have a couple more things. What does he want more than anything that only I can give him? And this is the only way I can get him to do what I need or what I want. I'm just tired. And then he's like, what do I do here? All right, this is the battle of the sexes that's being portrayed through the intimate relationship in the Song of Songs. Okay, let's go ahead and continue going. He states, open for me. She says, I've taken off my robe. How can I put it on? Which, by the way, isn't that an interesting excuse? All right, there are excuses in times not for intimacy. The Bible, even the Old Testament law, delineated some of those. But that she's taken off her clothes, the guy would be like, what's wrong? She's washed her feet, she's gotten a bath. It's just like, okay, these are reasons why not. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. Because I'm giving you an overview and I only have 40 minutes left and I have like 2 chapters left, he leaves in verse 4. My beloved put his hand to the latch and my heart was thrilled within me. The verb there, put his hand to the latch, the Jewish Publication Society translates this the best. My beloved pulled his hand away from the latch. In other words, what did he do? He left. That'd be the proper response. If your wife does not want intimacy, then you can live the selfless sacrificial life and leave her alone. Okay, that's one of the principles that the text is teaching. But I'm going to keep moving. In verse 5, she arises to go after him, but he's turned and gone. Her husband is now located somewhere. Where is her husband at this time in Song 5? What time of the day is it? It's at night. Where are they located? In a city. So her husband is now doing what? Metaphorically, wandering around the city streets and squares. Remember back in Song 3? Because she's denying him, she's putting him in a dangerous situation where that other woman could ensnare him. The song would expect us to understand that's what's going on in the text. The woman has sinned here, and the song is teaching us so. It's doing that primarily through the watchmen. Who are the watchmen characters? I am like info dumping on you a lot of information. You can write down some notes and we can have conversations about this. I've taught this on multiple occasions and I've told you already this was the last thing that I figured out because it was difficult. I mean, you have a woman being beaten in verse 7. Nobody was beaten. That didn't actually happen. And notice that the husband doesn't do the beating. Okay, big point there. He just leaves. Okay, the watchmen do the beating, and it's just metaphorical because the song is teaching us that what the woman did was wrong. Okay, she missed. The watchmen are simply like the ones that say this is right and this is wrong. And then she saw them in chapter 3. And what did the watchmen do to her in chapter 3? Nothing. They just passed her by. Because was she doing anything wrong? No, she wasn't. But here, she did do something wrong, and the 4 verbs of her rejection correspond to the 4 actions of the watchman in this text. I've taken off, I've put it on, I've washed, I've defiled. What did the watchmen do? They found me, they struck me, they wounded me, and they took my veil. There's 4 accusatives. I'm not the only one that has concluded this. There's a direct parallel, and the song is teaching a young lady, listen, there is a time to say no, but he's been outside for a long time. Okay, what is the loving thing to do? And this ain't it. This is not it. Okay, so what do we do? What's the answer? Look at this. I'm just like blasting through this. The daughters of Jerusalem appear in verse 9, and then she starts talking about how her husband is radiant and ruddy, distinguished among 10,000. His head's a head of gold, and all of these beautiful things. Okay, so this gets into the theology of the song and what it's teaching our daughters. And as we think through sexuality, okay, sexuality, particularly for a woman, is 90% mental. And what does the song do? It speaks to the daughters of Jerusalem, and the daughters are like, well, who is your husband? And then she begins to describe how he fails to take the trash out all the time, the car is always broken, the house is falling apart all the time. Guess what all of that stuff cultivates? Not desire. All right? And we are sinners, and us guys, we do dumb stuff. And if you're meditating and thinking about those kinds of things all the time, guess what there's not going to be? There's not going to be desire. So instead, what does the song teach the young lady to do? To think about his positive traits, which is what you have in verses 10 through 16. 10 through 16. I'm not going to go through all of those metaphors because this is kind of the big, huge flash overview. But it's teaching our daughters, think about his positive characteristics. Furthermore, speak well of your spouse when you're around others. So this is one of the things that's really going to crush marriages is when our wives are together and they're kind of griping about how their husband fails here or her husband fails there. And this is like a rot that destroys marriages and is very toxic. And so be on the lookout to speak well about your husband when you are around others. You have the daughters of Jerusalem being invoked in Song 5:9 and 6:1. I think I'm textually based when I make this statement. If I'm not textually based, I can make a general principle from other scripture passages. It's true anyway. You know what I mean? Okay, we need to speak well of our husbands. And if you're not speaking well of your husband around those other ladies, then it's going to just crush that desire as well. So speak well of your husband when around others. Third, be a spouse with positive characteristics. I mean, guys, let's be honest. We can probably help him out a little bit, right? Okay? We could be a man that's, distinguished among 10,000. We could seek to be more fit. Or, you could be a spiritual individual, but intimacy at the end of the day, guess what? It's physical. It's something physical. And so taking care of yourself, as you take a look at some of these metaphors, which I'm not going to work through a lot of them, but in verse 13, his cheeks are like beds of spices, mounds of sweet-smelling herbs. Okay, so what does that mean? That means he has last night's Cheetos kind of stuck in his beard, right? Okay, help her out a little bit, okay? Clean up. Look good. So be a spouse with positive characteristics. All right, so what is the way of wisdom? What does the song teach? Well, do you notice how the song resolves? This section resolves. In verse 2, it's like, my beloved has gone down to his garden, to the beds of spices, to graze in the garden and to gather lilies. It's like, oh, how did he get there? He was gone, and then all of a sudden, boom, he just shows up. Well, that's because this is a song. And so all of the pieces don't need to make complete sense like some dramatic story. Maybe it was a dream and she just wakes up and she's like, wow, that was a bad dream. The point is it's teaching a theological lesson to our daughters. And that theological lesson is very consistent with the gospel. To love your spouse selflessly and sacrificially. And who is your example? Christ's selfless sacrificial sacrifice is your example. And you love him because you've been loved. Okay, so the fear of the Lord is the major overarching theme of the Old Testament. When the New Testament says believe, the Old Testament says fear the Lord. If you're going to fear the Lord, then what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to live a life of belief. The two are opposite sides of the same coin, teaching the same truth. That's a whole other conversation, all right? But in this situation, I'm going to fear the Lord and love my husband even though he doesn't deserve it. Maybe he's been a bit of a scoundrel, but you're going to love him anyway. And you're going to trust the Lord to work in the heart of your husband. And then for the man, I'm going to fear the Lord and love my wife even when she sins against me. Even if she is in the wrong, what's the response? To rule over her? No. Okay, we're going to talk about that a little bit more too. No, it's to just love her and live the life of selfless self-denial. The life of self-denial, even when you've been sinned against. Sounds like I know somebody else that did that. Maybe his name was Jesus. Okay? And then Jesus empowers peace and the recreation of Eden in our marriages. All right, that's the way of wisdom. We're done with the first section. Section 2. Okay, so just so you know, I have done these as separate sermons. And you're going to get all three of them in one. This is like a 3-in-1. They do work very well together because the message goes all the way through 8:4. All right, but when can you actually preach a 3-chapter sermon, right? I got some pastors out there. Good luck. I know. So I've broken it up for people, but I usually have to go back and review like 5,000 things. All right, chapter 6 and verse 4. Let's read God's word, shall we? You are beautiful as Tirzah, my love, lovely as Jerusalem, awesome as an army with banners. Turn away your eyes from me, for they overwhelm me. Your hair is like a flock of goats, leaping down the slopes of Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of ewes that have come up from the washing. All of them bear twins. Not one among them has lost its young. Your cheeks are like halves of a pomegranate behind your veil. They are 60 queens and 80 concubines and virgins without number. My dove, my perfect one, is the only one of her mother, pure to her who bore her. The young woman saw her and called her blessed. The queens and the concubines also, and they praised her. Who is this who looks down like the dawn, beautiful as the moon, bright as the sun, awesome as an army with banners? Okay, did you pick up on a repeated phrase there? I'm going to stop there. I know our text goes on all the way to 7:10, but I'm going to stop right there because Song 6, 4 through 10 is the first unit, and it is talking about, well, what is it talking about? What is this phrase that's repeated? I know that this is very foreign information for us, so we may not have saw it. But there was a phrase at the end of verse 4, and there was a phrase repeated at the end of verse 10. Awesome as an army of banners. That's what this section is about. And it's about her beauty, right? I mean, look at your English translation. In verse 4, you are beautiful as Tirzah, my love, lovely as Jerusalem, awesome as an army with banners. Now I'm going to contend that's missing. Okay, that's not what the text is communicating. And I'm going to walk you through that. Okay? When you think awesome as an army of banners, what is a banner? What is a banner? And why is she being metaphorized as a city? Do you see that? You are beautiful like Tirzah. It may not register too well in a modern audience, okay, guys? You might not want to use that one. Honey, you're like Tirzah. You're like Jerusalem. You're as beautiful as Minneapolis. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, this is picking up from the previous section. Remember back in Song 5:2, we had those 4 names. He calls her 4 names. I told you those 4 names are important. The first name is a catchword going back to the previous section. So that one doesn't concern us. In Song 5:1, he states, I've come to my garden, my sister, my spouse. Then in 5:2, he says, open for me, my sister. Okay, that's it. We're done with that one. The names that concern our section are the next 3. What does he call her? My love, my dove, my perfect one. Those are the 3 names. And the last time he calls her my love is found in Song 6:3. Oh, my love, you're as beautiful as Tirzah. The only times he calls her my dove, my perfect one, are in Song 5:2 and in Song 6:9, which is at the end of the section. My dove, my perfect one. Oh, what is this essentially doing? It's essentially saying, hey, you know what we're talking about in Song 6:4 through... I have a verse reference there that's wrong, isn't it? It's not Song 6:3, it's Song 6:4 on the PowerPoint, Song 6:4. What's this doing in Song 6:4 through 10? Okay, it's by repeating these names, Solomon is essentially saying this section is related to what happened in Song 5:2 through 3. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about again. And furthermore, by repeating the phrase, awesome as an army with banners, Solomon is essentially saying this kind of captures the main idea of the section. So we need to study out that section. What is this talking about, awesome as an army with banners? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Let's jump into it. Awesome as an army with banners? I have a question mark next to it. What does this phrase mean? Well, this word for awesome, it occurs elsewhere. It occurs in, by the way, let me step back. We're going to go through 3 textual observations. We are going to do some exegesis. I need you to understand this because I would contend that most English translations, I think, get this wrong. Does anybody have the old KJV? You've got the old KJV? You want to read verse 4 for us? The awesome as an army of banners?
Terrible as an army.
Oh, how do they translate it?
Terrible.
And that's actually more along the lines. You see, they're metaphorizing the word and thinking that she's like this a beautiful thing because it says that she's beautiful. Or maybe beauty empowers a wife to invoke fear. Terrible as an army with banners is actually a better translation. I'm going to contend that awesome actually means terrifying. I'm going to make it a participle. Terrifying like an army of banners. Because if you have an army of banners, well, what is that? It's an army, friends. And if you see an army coming and you're the city, is that going to be like a lovey-dovey feeling? Probably not. So I think we've missed the idea of the text here, and awesome misses the point. And most English translations translate it as awesome. It's, I think, ironic that the old KJV actually is closer to the point. We see this verb, well, actually this noun, in Habakkuk 1, 6 and 7. For behold, I'm raising up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, who march through the breadth of the earth to seize dwellings not their own. They are fearsome, they're dreaded, they're terrifying. That's the idea. What do we literally have in Song 6:4? The battle of the sexes. Do we see that? There's a fight that's transpiring. I'm going to develop this a little bit more for you. So this is terrifying. That's the idea. They're dreaded. Dreaded as an army of banners. Okay, now we need to understand something else. Why is she a woman? Personified cities are women in the Old Testament. This is everywhere in the Old Testament. Okay, this is why it was so important that the men fight to defend the city against the invading conqueror. Because if they lose, guess what's going to happen even to the woman? Okay, so the city is metaphorized as a woman. It's a feminine noun even in the Hebrew language. We see this in Isaiah repeatedly. I have a few verses up here just to help emphasize this point. This is the word that the Lord has spoke concerning Sennacherib. She despises you, she scorns you, the virgin daughter of Zion. So Zion is a virgin daughter. As a virgin daughter, guess what? No conqueror has ever conquered her. Okay? She's a virgin city. You have this of Babylon in Isaiah 47:1, Isaiah 52:1. It goes through it as well. I'm going to keep moving. Okay, so personified cities are women. And when a husband wants to have an intimate encounter with his wife, what is he doing? Well, he's going into the city. He's entering the city. And so as he's coming to the city in Song 6:4, what does he see? He sees awesome as an army of banners. He doesn't see a city that's welcoming him in. Make sense? War and peace. What is the scene in Song 6:4? It's war. What should it be? What does he desire it to be? He desires it to be a city with a gate open. A gate that's inviting him in. That wants his banner placed over the city. Because banner, think of Iwo Jima. They're putting the flag up. And it's just like, we've conquered this territory. This is now ours. And that's the metaphor through the song. And that's the third point. 3 textual observations. I'm going so fast. If you have questions, write them down. We'll talk about it. Okay, I can talk about it in the break. But there's so many metaphors in this passage that it's like drinking out of a fire hose. But a banner represents conquest. And that one I think we can kind of understand. In Song 2:4, she says, his banner over me was love. And that's when things are Edenic. Things are working the way that they're supposed to in Song 2:4. And what does she say? She's not resisting him. She's like, no, he has conquered me. But how has he conquered her? Has he conquered her through force, manipulation, coercion? No. He's conquered her with love. This is the way that it's supposed to be. And as he loves her as Christ loves the church, okay, what does she then desire? She desires his banner being placed over the city. That's not what's going on in Song 6:10. In Song 8:10, I was a wall and my breasts were like towers. Look at this. Wall, towers, what does that evoke? Woman as city metaphor. into any man who seeks to enter her city. What is she? She's a fortress. And she's going to fight. But what does her husband see in Song 8:10? I was in his eyes. Her husband looks at her, and what does he see? Peace, not war. But in Song 6:4, we have terrifying as an army of banners. Okay, whew, that was a lot, right? Okay, it goes into Song 6:5 too. I'm gonna skip this one. I want to talk about the queens and the concubines. And verse 8, there are 60 queens and 80 concubines and virgins without number. Why are they coming up? Well, because of a contrast. Look at what it states in verse 9. My dove, my perfect one, is the only one. All right? You have the queens and the concubines and all the girls. But who is this woman in a relationship the way that God designed it? She is his only one. In other words, with whom can he enjoy an intimate encounter? Her. Who else? Nobody. All right? And this is what also empowers her. And this is the way that God designed it, that it would be this monogamous relationship. And he is then here entreating her and helping her to realize again who she is in her identity as wife. So this is a whole other conversation, and I have my wife, she talks about this stuff sometimes, speaking to the young ladies and helping them to understand. Listen, there's the Proverbs 31 woman, and you need to be doing all of the things, and you need to be industrious, and you need to be building up your husband, and you need to be taking care of the household and taking care of the kids and all of the things, okay? But there's only one thing that your husband can do with only you, and it's intimacy. And I think that what this text is doing is it's highlighting and teaching our daughters the primacy of importance concerning the affairs of life. C.J. Mahaney, his wife, they wrote about this in a book. If you're wondering what it is, I can look it up and tell it to you. I can't remember right now off the top of my head. But she was on this panel. C.J. Mahaney's written some really good books on worldliness and the cross-centered life and so on and so forth. Well, his wife was on some kind of a panel, and there were a bunch of ladies up there, and they were asked, what is the one thing that you do to encourage your husband the most? And C.J. Mahaney's wife was on this panel, and she was like, oh my goodness, if C.J. was here, I know what he would say. Did I really say that? And she did, and she said everybody just kind of giggled and laughed because guess what? They knew it. What is the number one way in which a pastor's wife can encourage and build up her husband the most? She is the only one. The only one. So recapturing that idea of who you are as wife. You are like a god. Whoa, did I really say that? Look at verse 10. Who is this who looks down like the dawn? The immense power that a wife has in a monogamous relationship. Beautiful as the moon, bright as the sun. Scholars have regularly acknowledged that this is like invoking this picture of the woman, the wife, as having like a godlike power in this relationship. Terrible as an army with banners. Okay, so how does this then resolve? Well, in verse 11, we go down to the nut orchard. I'm going to summarize a whole bunch of stuff because I've got to get to the last section, all right? We went down to the nut orchard to look at the blossoms. But then in verse 12, something's going on. It's a really difficult verse. Scholars debate it. Your translations are going to differ, but it's not good, okay? Because then in verse 13, it's like return, return. O Shulamite, return, return, that we may look on you. And then he talks about how beautiful she is in chapter 7, verses 1 through 9. It concludes in verse 10, I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. Oh, what word is that? Genesis 3:16. Now wait a minute, what did Genesis 3:16 say? Your desire will be for your husband. Who has the desire in Genesis 3:16? The wife. Who's speaking in Song 7:10? The wife. But she's not talking about her desire, is she? What is she talking about? His desire. And what I've argued is that that word desire has the idea of an inclination to lead. And what is the one way in which a woman leads in the marriage relationship? Through the marriage bed. And what is the song teaching the young lady? Don't use this weapon in your marriage. It will not end well. It is not the design. Well, then what do I do? This is like my most effective way of getting anything done. Well, you have to believe. You have to say, God, I trust all of my life to you. A living sacrifice? Think about that. I mean, this is like part of the discipleship material and mapping discipleship, and then I walk with young men through all the time. Okay? Present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Well, what is a sacrifice? It's dead. I'm dead to self. And what are you going to do then? He could take advantage of me. Yes, and what are you going to do? You're going to trust the God of the universe. He will take care of you. He will sustain you. Will you believe? And then thinking through, I talked to you yesterday about Song 3:6 and Song 8:5. Who is this coming up from the wilderness? You have the beauty queen in Song 3, and then you've got the ordinary girl leaning on her lover in Song 8:5. We have that phrase, who is this, right here in Song 6:10. Who is this who looks like the dawn? And what is the song asking our daughters? Who are you going to be? Are you going to be like the beauty queen who's going to use her intimacy and use her beauty to empower herself to get what she wants? That's not the life of faith. That's you manipulating. That's you in control. Or are you going to just use your intimacy to build up your husband and trust the God of the universe to take care of you, to sustain you, to give you that strength? And the song is right in this middle section asking our daughters to do this very thing. Okay, so then we get in Song 7:10, the recreation of Eden. Your desire will be for your husband, but he will rule over you. Sin has a desire to conquer Cain, this inclination to lead Cain in Genesis 4:7. And in Song 7:10, the wife of faith states, I am my lover's. Like I belong to him, okay? I am his. And he has this desire to lead me. And I'm going to trust the God of the universe to take care of me. And then we have the recreation of Eden. And we get the recreation of Eden in the text. That's what Song 7:11 through the rest of the section is. And I've got 12 minutes. You've probably got 5,000 questions. That's okay. I told you. Do you see how this all kind of flows through? It's coming right from Song 5, 2, and 3. And then it's working through the metaphor of the city and the terror. And then moving into now the Eden. That's the battlefield. And now we're into the Garden of Eden. Let's read Song 7:11. Come, my beloved, let us go into the fields, lodge in the villages. Let us go out early to the vineyards and see whether the vines have budded, whether the grape blossoms have opened, and the pomegranates are in bloom. There I will give you my love. The mandrakes give forth fragrance, and beside our doors are all choice of fruits, new as well as old, which I have laid up for you, O my beloved. Chapter 8, verse 1. By the way, the chapter divisions in the Song of Songs are just terrible. Like, they're just not even close. I mean, it's like swing and a miss. Miss again, you know. Song 5:1, everybody agrees that Song 5:1 should be in the previous chapter. I mean, they were one verse off. It's like you had one job, right? You were one verse off, friend. All right, this one's bad too. This one's not as bad, but still. Okay, chapter 8, verse 1. Oh, that you were like a brother to me who nursed at my mother's breasts. That's kind of weird. Okay, well, let's keep going. If I found you outside, I would kiss you and none would despise me. I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother, she who used to teach me. I would give you spiced wine to drink, the juice of my pomegranate. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. Okay, this is our last section. And what do we have here? We have the recreation of Eden. And what does that look like? Well, she states in verse 11, which, by the way, who's doing the speaking in verse 11? She is. And what is she doing? She's exhorting him, come, my lover, let us go into the fields and lodge in the villages. Okay, why? Let's get out of town. Okay, so we talked already about how intimacy for a woman is 90% mental. Well, what's going on at home? Oh, I got the kids' piano lessons, the trombone lessons. Okay, we've got to get the meal ready for tomorrow. There's people coming over. We've got to prep that meal. There's then the house needs cleaned. There's the garden outside. The flower beds haven't been taken care of. Somebody needs to mow the lawn. Okay, you see what's going on here? So my wife uses the illustration. It's like you're a web browser and you got 25 tabs open, right? And what might be one way which can help a wife, okay, to focus on her husband? Close some of those tabs. What might be a good way to close a bunch of those tabs? Get out of town. Get out of the house. Even if you get a hotel that's in town. Just like it's 5 minutes away. Why are we going to blow like $100, $150? Listen, couples need to get away. They need to get away from all of the busyness and everything that's going on in life and start shutting those tabs. What does it look like for a man to seize the foxes? Remember we talked about seizing the foxes yesterday? Helping her shut down some of those tabs. Okay, by helping sacrificially, selflessly serving her and shutting down some of those tabs. So what do we have here? And by the way, who's taking the lead here? She's doing it. She's like, come, let's go do this. Let's get out early to the vineyards and see whether the vines have budded, whether grape blossoms. It's a time for love. And she states there I will give you my love. Then verse 13 is kind of weird. The mandrakes give forth fragrance. Beside our doors are all choice fruits, new as well as old. Who likes old fruit? Do you like old fruit?
Dried fruit is good.
Dried fruit. That's not bad. That's not bad. That might work. Okay, that might work. But when I see the bananas, bananas don't. Anyway. they sit there a little too long. There's like, she gone. They're banana bread. All right, stick them in the freezer or whatever. Mix them up into the banana bread. We're done. I mean, old fruit. What's up with old fruit? New as well as old. Well, what are fruit? I know I didn't take the time to develop this, but back in Song 4, fruit is a metaphor for the intimate delights between a husband and a wife. Okay, the woman is the garden, she is the vineyard, and she's offering her husband fruits, new as well as old. A reference to things we've done in the past that we've enjoyed, or hey, maybe something new. And what do we see in this section? There's a diversity. There's a diversity in the place of love. Let's get out of town. There's a diversity in the time for love. Did you see the verse 12? Let us get out early to the vineyards. Okay, so early in the morning, late at night, maybe in the middle of the day. There's a diversity even to the acts of love, new as well as old. Okay, there's a diversity here. And then, as we continue moving through the text, then you have this wife again in chapter 8, verse 1. Oh, that you were like a brother to me who nursed at my mother's breast. It's like, okay, what in the world is going on with this? If I found you outside, I would kiss you and none would despise me. Okay, that gives us a theology of kissing, by the way, which is something we're going to talk about in the next session. And I'll also talk maybe a little bit about it tonight at the teen get-together. Okay, what did their culture think of public displays of affection between husband and wife? Between husband and wife. Okay, they didn't like it. Because what is kissing? Well, particularly kissing as a synecdoche. Synecdoche is a big fancy word for a part for the whole, for the intimate relationship. This is why I think you may now kiss your bride. Because what is supposed to now be permissible? The intimate relationship, because you've covenanted together. And what is the kiss? It's a synecdoche, a part for the whole for the intimate relationship. So that's why they didn't like public displays of affection. But what does this wife want? She wants his affection. It's like back in Song 1:2, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. Here, she is out just in the regular affairs of life, and she's like, oh, I wish you were like a brother, because then I could kiss you, and nobody would despise me, because familial kissing was okay, all right, but romantic kissing was not okay. And then she states, I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother. And this was something that, this is what the song is teaching. You know, desire according to God's design, awake the desire of your husband. And we as complementarians, remember the big, huge debate between complementarians and egalitarians. Egalitarians is equality. Complementarians is God's designed the husband as the leader of the home. And then God's designed the wife as the helper. And there's the role of loving selflessly and sacrificially in that leadership. And then submitting to that leader. All right, that's complementarian. That's where we are. And I believe we've kind of read that into our marriages and even the intimate relationships, where we have here actually who's taking the lead in Song 8:2. I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother. And we've kind of bought into this complementarian, the man's the one that's in control, and so she has something that he wants, and then he has to be the one to say, hey, I'd like this. And then she's got to be like, okay. I'm like, that's not the picture that's being presented in the song at all. Look at how often she's the one that's actually taking the initiative in the intimate relationship. It's like all the time. He only initiates an intimate encounter like 2 or 3 times, and it's usually when there's problems. The song kind of presents a very different perspective on even the awakening of love. And it's right here in Song 8:2 where it reaches kind of its climax. I would lead you. I would bring you into the house of my mother, she who used to teach me. I would give you spiced wine to drink the juice of my pomegranate. What's up with the pomegranate? Do you know what a pomegranate looks like? Yeah. Okay, that might explain that metaphor for you. If you're not sure what a pomegranate looks like, look up a pomegranate and you'll understand the metaphor. It's probably got something to do with the mother's breasts at the beginning of chapter 8, verse 1. And so she's desiring to intoxicate him with her sexuality. And what has he done to encourage this? Okay, what's going on in just the regular affairs of the day? Chapter 8, verse 1, nothing. Okay, the song's presenting a very different approach to love. I'm not arguing for just, hey, you know what, we shouldn't awaken love, we need to teach our young people. These principles we teach, we teach to unmarried girls because this is not the message that the world is teaching, and it's not often the message that the church is teaching either, because you're only going to find this in the Song of Songs. But guess what it creates? Peace. And I tell the young men, what do you need to be focusing on? You need to focus on your mission, all right? Intimacy is like this one small part of Christian living. There's way bigger things God wants you to do. Focus on your mission. And then, what did you have in the Garden of Eden? Then you had Eve coming alongside of him, and saying, hey, let's have some fun. Let me refresh you. This is God's design for love, and this can be empowering for our Christian families. This is a book, The Flirtation Experiment. I do not agree with a lot of the stuff that some of these people say, but it's kind of interesting how one wife, she was very much outside of her comfort zone, but she gave this a shot, and she started basically flirting and propositioning her husband, and how it created peace in their marriage. It created peace in their marriage. I'm not going to read through the quotes. I'm going to go ahead and skip this. I want to just wrap this up. So we need a desire according to God's design. What does that look like? Awaken desire for your husband. Intimately lead your husband. Intoxicate your husband. And then, guess what's completely illogical? Awakening love. The affections and interests that our unmarried daughters have before marriage, all right, does not prepare them for this kind of love. Because what does the man do to awaken her? Okay, she's thinking about him. Oh, what did we talk about back in Song 5? And then Song 6. Okay, by thinking and meditating upon his positive characteristics, what does she then do? She creates the desire for him. There are scripture passages connected to all of this because this is something that my wife and I have become strongly persuaded of. And we've been discipling the next generation. And we've said, hey, this is God's design, and it can create peace in your home. And what we've seen is some results. We haven't been doing this for too long, but There's a group of young people who I would say are very happily married. They have a proper biblical theology of sexuality. And it's peaceful when we just say, hey, you know what? This is my job. I'm going to focus on my mission. I'm the man. I'm going to lead. I'm going to love you selflessly and sacrificially. And then let's enjoy life. Let's enjoy it together. Questions, comments? Maybe some nasty remarks? There's a fire hose. Do you see why I don't work through this material very often? And the primary audience is woman, and guess what I am? A man. My wife's not quite knowledgeable to have this part of it down because there's a ton of information. So I'm still teaching her, but we wrote the book because we want our wives and our mothers to grasp this theology, to then be able to teach it to the next generation. And that's what we're going to talk about in the final session. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for this time we're able to get into your word. I thank you for the teaching that your word provides. And I pray, Lord, that you give us wisdom to live it out in our marriages, but then also to point others to the truths of your word. Give us peace. In Jesus' name, amen.